Following World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union entered the Cold War, locking into a fierce global rivalry where scientific dominance was viewed as a primary indicator of national strength. The Soviet Union scored a major victory in 1957. They successfully launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite, into Earth's orbit. 4 years later, the technological gap widened. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to journey into space. Weeks after Gagarin's flight, U.S. President John F. Kennedy stood before Congress and committed the nation to a staggering deadline, landing the man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the decade was out. At the exact moment Kennedy made that promise, NASA had not yet managed to send a single astronaut into orbit. The technology to reach the moon simply did not exist. The Apollo mission was a geopolitical mandate disguised as scientific exploration. To win this standoff, the United States had to invent entirely new disciplines of engineering and mathematics against an impossibly tight clock. Meeting Kennedy's deadline required a mobilization of labor and resources that reached into every corner of American industry. This animated chart compares typical government project budgets of the era against the financial scale of Apollo. The program required $25.8 billion, roughly $250 billion today. That money funded the work of over 400,000 scientists, engineers, and technicians across 20,000 different companies. Escaping Earth's gravity required the Saturn V rocket. It stood 363 feet tall and weighed a staggering 3,000 tons. At the rocket's base, we see the 5 massive F-1 engines. Together, they generated 7.6 million pounds of thrust. Developing machinery this powerful at such high speed required severe compromises, and the learning curve proved deadly. On January 27, 1967, a fire broke out inside the Apollo 1 spacecraft during a routine launch rehearsal. Tragically, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee lost their lives. The disaster halted the program and forced engineers to completely tear down and redesign their spacecraft safety systems. Reaching the lunar surface required a continuous process of trial by fire. Exposing the fatal flaws in the engineering meant human beings had to test those limits. On July 16, 1969, the Apollo 11 mission finally left the launch pad. After a 3-day transit across the vacuum of space, the crew reached lunar orbit. Commander Neil Armstrong and lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin climbed into their landing craft, named Eagle, and detached from the command module, leaving astronaut Michael Collin behind in orbit. As the Eagle descended toward the surface, the onboard computer became overloaded. Warning alarms blared inside the tiny cabin as they dropped toward the moon. Armstrong looked out the window and realized the automated system was steering them directly into a deep crater surrounded by massive boulders. He immediately took manual control of the spacecraft, hovering the lander over the surface and scanning for a flat, clear patch of ground. With the fuel gauge dropping dangerously low, Armstrong finally set the Eagle down at Tranquility Base. They had mere seconds of propellant left. A decade of intense global logistics and billions of dollars had ultimately relied entirely on the split-second manual piloting skills of one man. Several hours after landing, Neil Armstrong climbed down the ladder and pressed his boot into the lunar dust, marking the first time a human had walked on another celestial body. About 20 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined him. Looking out over the stark gray crater fields, Aldrin described the alien environment as magnificent desolation. The two men spent the next few hours setting up scientific equipment, taking photographs of the landscape, and planting the American flag in the soil. Meanwhile, 60 miles above them, Michael Collin circled the moon alone in the command module. This orbital map illustrates Collin's trajectory. Every time his orbit took him around the far side of the moon, the rock blocked all radio waves, severing his communication with Earth for 48 minutes at a time. While Armstrong and Aldrin performed the most widely broadcast achievement in history, Collins managed the mission's lifeline in orbit, accepting a total loss of contact with Earth as the inevitable cost of his position. After discarding the lunar module, the crew reunited and began the journey home, splashing down safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24. They immediately entered a strict 21-day quarantine to ensure they carried no unknown lunar organisms. They brought back 47.5 pounds of rock and soil, handing researchers physical data that explained the actual geologic composition of the moon. Back on Earth, the event had commanded the attention of an estimated 600 million people, watching the blurry broadcast live in their living rooms. The severe technical constraints of the mission forced leaps in engineering. The rigorous demands of Apollo directly accelerated modern computing, telecommunications, and material science. By mobilizing hundreds of thousands of people to solve a singular, seemingly impossible problem, Apollo 11 demonstrated that coordinated technical innovation can expand human presence to worlds once thought permanently out of reach.